All right, round four.
All right.
Mr. Stromberg of the Upper Darby Strombergs.
Well, yes. And this will be a poem about the Upper Darby Strombergs. This is a title poem from my book, The Elephant's Mouth.
Oh, I love this one.
And this is a true story. It's been, well, it's the heart of it is a true story that my dad used to tell. The Elephant's Mouth. What's it take to join the circus? My father asked. A gang of workers were putting up a tent, big hammers ringing on the pegs in rhythm. I'm thinking that I'd like to join up with you guys. This was 45 or thereabout, I'd guess, when the circus used to come to town each year. My father was just a boy then, 8 or 9. Their train would rumble past his house on Guilford Road. Well, to join the circus, one offered. You gotta be brave. He leaned on his hammer and mopped his brow with his shirt. Are you brave, kid? He asked, appraising my father, who, conscious of the chuckling men, answered, I'm brave. Enough to stick your head up in an elephant's mouth? The workers gathered, happy for a break. I ain't afraid, he said, a bit less certain. Well, come on then, I know just the elephant. The animal was penned up in a tent nearby. Pulling back the flap, the man said, You're sure? I'm sure, my father said, not sure at all, not when he saw it stamp its mud-splattered feet. Held by his knees, my father was raised up to its mouth, and he did it, stuck his head inside, to the delight of all the roaring men. Then eyes shut tight, pulled free, his bravery made clear. Whatever my father felt inside that creature's mouth, I'll never know. I've looked at elephants chewing grass or slack-jawed in repose and wondered, is it hot in there? Do they have teeth? My eyes were closed, my father says. I can't remember. I try to place myself within that tent. You weren't even thought of then, he laughs. I was a different person. So much has happened since. He thinks they said that he should come back when he was old, that he was grade A circus material, and gave him passes to the show that night, which must have been at least a little disappointing. How does a kid go back to St. Cyril's after that? Desk of unworldly children blotting ink, a sister with her yardstick in the aisle, the wide blackboard that seemed to bar the way to fun. Within a few brief days, the tents were all brought down, and then the neighborhood was taken back by normal people and their normal task. No snakeskin man walked to the corner store for smokes. One of the hardest things I've ever had to do was to let go of my belief, long held, that I was set apart for something special, blessed by distinction like a high wire trapeze artist. And to be honest, I'm not sure I have let go. The illustrated woman haunts my nights with promises of some lost and unclaimed life. I have to will myself to go to work each day. But sometime in his 20s, my father married my mother. He sold his red hot rod convertible and then acquired a mortgage and raised 5 boys. For 30 some odd years, he worked for the school district. Today, my father lives just blocks from Guilford Road. No tent has gone up in the field for decades. The train line that ran through is long since gone, and he hardly can remember that elephant at all.
Wow, that's a hell of a poem.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, that's sensational. So it bristles with with delicious detail. So a little uncertain. That's great. A little uncertain. I'm
Yeah.
brave, he said. A little uncertain. I mean, there's all kinds of great details like that. You know, the workman using his shirt, you know, to mop his brow, and there's great observed detail. And the story itself is one of those great, timeless, real life anecdotes that if you're lucky, somebody in your family has got a story that's that good. But you don't end the poem with the end of the anecdote. You turn it around and put it into terms of your own life.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets even more interesting for me, because on the one hand, you say, it was hard for me to let go of the idea that I was special in a way that your father must have felt and had confirmed. I mean, he puts his head in the elephant's mouth,
right,
and is accepted by the, you know, by the circus people, that's the challenge. But
yeah.
then he can't live it. He's got to, and as you say, it's like, how are you going to keep him down on the farm after they've seen Paris? Well, he didn't just see Paris. You know, he got a ticket to Paris, but then he couldn't go. So there's all of that. And then as his son, you're saying, well, you know, I had this feeling that there were things I was destined for, and it was hard to let go of them. But then you qualify and you say, well, maybe I haven't completely let go of it, which means that you still live as time goes on with this unrealized and unconfirmed sense, because you don't get the confirmation that he got.
Right.
So you have this unconfirmed sense that that you are fated for extraordinary things, and yet you have to live with that uncertainty. And then you bring it around to where he doesn't even remember he had his eyes closed inside the elephant's mouth. So it's very rich, because you've added layers that, you know, that complicate the whole issue of what it means to do something remarkable, and what it means to be acknowledged for doing something remarkable, and what it means to have to live without being acknowledged. And yet, all of that to the side, you turn all of that into a poem which is itself remarkable. So you are fated to do remarkable things, and you prove it in the poem itself. Yeah. If that makes sense to you. I mean, I realize.
That's flat.
I know you want to dwell on what hasn't happened. But something has happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too that it's a type of bravery too, to be like, anybody could strive to be extraordinary, right? And everybody has a sense of themselves as being someone whose potential, I could have done this, I could have done that, I could be this. But it's a type of bravery to just accept your circumstances too, I think, you know, and not want to be somebody other than who you turned out to be, you know.
Well, and you acknowledge that when you say, but X amount of time later, he gets married and has 5 children. Right. And here we are now at this promontory, this vantage point, looking back. And then you are the natural inheritor of all of these issues. Right. And then you personalize them for you. It's a very rich poem. I mean, if you only had the anecdote, it would be terrific. But you deepen it so much. And I think it's really important that you do that, because any person with the right set of experiences can tell a great anecdote. But you've done a lot more than that here. You used a great anecdote
to come back
to do more.
Like, it takes me a long time to write something, and I put it away. At first, it was just the anecdote, you know?
I'm not surprised.
And you know, and I knew that couldn't be the end, right? There's got to be something more. And it takes a while, like, well, where's this going? Why am I writing? And it's sort of discover it as you go, right? But that's you know, I think that's the advantage of writing slowly and taking your time or whatever. I write way too slow. You know, sometimes they don't even happen. But I think that's like, because I discover things on the way, and that was one that really paid off, I guess. So.
Well, it's also very interesting the way that you parallel him not remembering, you know, saying, I don't remember, my eyes were closed, to the present moment. He hardly even remembers the elephant at all. So in a way, like the two opposite poles of his life, you know, the one where he was most close to something heroic, you know, in a way, and the moment when he is most distant from it, because it's such a distant past. He actually, in neither case, he has really a grasp on what it is.
Right.
So,
yeah,
it's like the pursuit of transcendence. You get to the transcendence and you like miss it. You don't even know what it is. You can't fathom it. It's unfathomable. And then, you know, later on when it's almost something that happened to someone else or didn't happen to you, it's unfathomable yet again.
Yeah, I will say too that my dad, and he was still alive when I wrote this poem and when I first published it. And he was like, yeah, that's pretty much how it was. Right. But he had a lot of great stories and didn't even know, like your poem about like the sledding, then now I had the story. And he would just like suddenly mention stuff. And I'm like, how did you sit on this for that long? Like he was like, did I ever tell you about the time I had a pet monkey? Like a organ grinder's monkey came down out of the tree when he was a sexton. And I'm like, no, how am I like 19 years old or whatever, how old I was? And this is the first time I'm hearing that. I would leave with this everywhere I went. Like, I would be like, let me tell you about the monkey that I had one time. Right. And he just sat on that. And like other great stories, like this guy that he worked with that he was like a midget or whatever. It's probably not politically correct, but he had like a delusion that Ronald McDonald was sleeping with his wife. And every time they drove by McDonald's, he'd be like, Ronald McDonald, I spit on him. He sleep with my wife. And it was like, how did you never tell this story until now? It's like, that was kind of weird. He's a little off, but it's like, you had gold here, gold. Like I would be telling that, I would tell strangers that all the time. So anyway.
Yeah, but you're a storyteller, and apparently he is not.
Yeah, I guess not.
And that's quite independent of whether you have good material.
Right.
You know, there's people with great material that they just, like you say, he's just sat on it. He didn't feel compelled. So, you know, that's he should have been your writer. You could be the comic and he could be the writer.
Well, in a way, it's easier to tell something like that happened to someone else than if it happened to you yourself, because there's a temptation to just take it for granted or to just kind of like get accustomed. Oh, that happened. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, like I'll do the most infuriating thing ever, which is comment on a poem I just wrote a few days ago, which is not ready for prime time. I cannot share it with anybody, but I just wrote it, and I think like it's something that happened to me 20 years ago. And at the time, I was like, wow, this seems kind of great. I wonder what the significance of this incident that just happened to me is. And I thought, well, I don't know what the significance is. I'm going to figure it out eventually. Maybe I'll write about it. 20 years later, I remember this out of nowhere, like in January. And I'm like, I'm just going to write this down and do nothing with it. And so I wrote it down as accurately as I could. And I'm like, I don't think it needs anything else. I think the story in itself is like, I don't need to, I always felt like I need to process it through my brain.
Right.
Come up with some kind of a brilliant insight, and then I can write about it. But in fact, all I needed was 20 years distance, and then I just tell this, and it's interesting in itself. So in a
Yeah.
way, like for your father, some of those things could have been the same. It's like, well, it just happened to me. So it's like there's not much to like, if I come up with some brilliant angle, a spin to put on it, then I can talk about it. But actually, no, it just like fell into your lap.
Huh. Wow.
Sometimes it works like that.
Oh, well, this is good. Great tales. Um, Part 4, Anton.
Okay, I guess in the effort not to leave this poem until part 5 and end the whole conversation on a complete downer, I'll read the really sad and violent and traumatic poem, one of the most traumatic I've ever written. Um, but I don't know, some people like it, or at least they appreciate me writing it, so I'll read it. And it actually kind of resonates with the Easter dinner, except in this case, well, it happened to be a Thanksgiving dinner. It doesn't really matter if it was Thanksgiving or anything, but, a real incident that kind of prompted a reflection into very dark and violent history, both world history and things that I remember from my own life or people I knew, and all prompted by basically somebody at a Thanksgiving dinner, kind of like out of nowhere, going really dark and talking about a lot of sort of really tough things that were perhaps not something that I was expecting that night. So this is called Dust Cloud. Eyes glazing over your ribeye with rivulets of molasses, your hair impeccable, prim black dress, black hatchet-like shoes. You taught a master class in courtesy to your new acquaintances, with just enough frilly words to delight and confuse. A perfectly glitz-coordinated icon of professionalism and education, until someone brought up the ugly, towering monument not far from your father's home, once erected for intimidation, now transformed into abstract art by Molotovs. Your eyes flashed electric around the room and out into the city, the way early autumn sets alleyway maples on fire overnight. Justice for the demeaned, long overdue generosity. All evening you shone, fired us out to accelerate the good fight. Before they set him on fire, they divvied up his body as trophies within his earshot. You take the left leg, I'll take the skull. Then they came to his parents' door. Your son's ribcage is still on the patio. You are permitted to collect it, if you wish, tomorrow after nightfall. The parents politely nodded, holding off the vertigo, keeping their eyes dry until the door closed behind the departing sadist's dust cloud, knowing what kind of dismemberment awaited them otherwise. Even years later, their wailing never let itself out of their rib cages, trapped in dreams, manifesting in Freudian slips as they heard of people who zapped others on authoritative command. For the rest of their lives, they imagined God's face in the bricks of nearby apartment buildings to help themselves stand. There's a mass grave just outside my town, where my best friend's grandfather dropped by every week to say penance, never talking at dinner about everything he saw, learned, and did in his decades with the secret police. It had started as a war atrocity. Soon, gunshots were so common they could barely be heard anymore, like second violins in an opera. Silence mixed for generations with blood. Then one day the leader's monument hung upside down from a helicopter. And I look at you now, decades later, and the undertow in your eyes scares the hell out of me if you want me to be perfectly honest. But you don't. You will never ask. And maybe you're right. All evening, the buzzing of flies over future corpses.
Jeez. Yeah. Wow.
A lot of the art that you bring to this, for me, shows up in the brief respites from the language of violence into a quick look in another direction. So like gunshots were so common they could barely be heard anymore, like second violins in an opera. So, much of the time when we learn about using details to reinforce the overall message of the poem, to use simile and metaphor and things like that, and imagery that will concentrate and amplify the message. This is the opposite. This provides the smallest of respites, just a tiny breather that allows your mind to go, just to look down a hallway to somewhere else, to remind you that there is another reality. So just to bring, it's so concrete. Opera, violins in an opera, second violins in an opera. That's, you can't do more with 6 words in the context of the end of this poem than that. And there are other places where you do it. But that's very, it's leavening. And I think without the leavening, this could just completely brutalize the reader or the listener. You know what I mean? And yet the leavening is not to bring in an element of hope, because there isn't any here, but it's to just give us a respite. And I'm grateful for that, because I think it's great. And, also some of the earlier imagery, before we really know what we're in for. So, yeah, the way early autumn sets alleyway maples on fire overnight. And it's so, okay, setting maples on fire is the core of that. But setting maples on fire overnight is a rich extra detail. Setting alleyway maples on fire, I mean, this is real skill. I mean, I salute you. It's
I think
tremendous.
That final line too is just extraordinary. Like, it's a great.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's one of the best things.
It's a complex. A complex situation that, again, we can infer it, and you have enough information to construct a kind of a genealogy. But it's not necessary to do that. There's enough there to let you take it all in one breath without pausing to say, well, wait a minute, who's related to whom? What happened? Mm-hmm. When is this exactly? All of that is secondary, and it's permitted to remain secondary because there's enough skeleton there, excuse the expression, to permit us to infer it while we're still transfixed by the rest of this, because the mass of this is just so, I mean, we are transfixed by it. And the other thing that I wanted to say is casual people don't spend much of their time, who haven't experienced this in their lives, thinking about, because they have no experience of knowing how they would respond in a situation like this.
No.
Might expect that the parents are going to send up a cry. But you turn the screws on this just brilliantly, that they know they can't, because of what that means. And that not just in the moment, but for years afterward, they know they can't. And so it just magnifies the you know the horror of the situation to see this outcome and no, this is exactly the way these people would react because they had no other choice. And how many people before reading this poem or hearing you read it would ever have spent any time thinking about the real thing? Because, we get kind of not very well worked out representations of these things in films and on TV that don't get to the truth of it this far.
Right.
So, I mean, you're bearing witness, and it's one of the things. It's one of the powers you've been given, and you use it. You wield it really, really well, and I'm grateful for that because a person who has not had the experience has no business making it up.
Right.
And you don't have to. So you're the person to tell us these things.
Yeah, but in a way, I didn't have the experience firsthand. So in some ways, I'm just kind of telling I'm trying not to make things up. So I'm just trying to kind of retell. I mean, it's true. Like the thing about the mass grave and the grandfather. I mean, that's I mean, of course, some of I'm sure that you can nitpick some details about not being exactly true to what actually was there, but there was that the grandfather, someone I knew, he actually did have he went to, did penance at a mass grave.
Yeah.
It's
arguable. It's arguable that the person who had the firsthand experience would have a much harder time putting it into words, and that you had exactly the right kind of distance to bring it to us secondhand.
Yeah, because I was for me, it was almost, I was actually even third hand because, I was too young to hear about it from him. My parents told me about it some years later. I may have been in the United States by then. But of course, I kind of knew what was going on. I mean, it was pretty self-evident, but it was also at one point I directly asked somebody, well, what did the guy do? And engineer, he was in construction. I'm oh, okay, well, all right, I guess it's a white lie. That's what he's supposed to tell me. But then, my suspicions were corroborated because when they weren't talking to someone who was 12 or 13, they were kind of retelling the actual story.
Wow. Well, it's, as I say, it's powerful stuff, and you're able to bear witness, whether it's secondhand or third hand, the enormity of it is such that even from this distance, we still feel it, we still hear it, we still see it. So, yeah. Wow. Well, like you say, you didn't read it last. So as not to leave us on a tremendous downer. Well, okay, so I have to go again. I cannot plumb your depths, sir. My story of the old country is a different one, and much more benign. But I want to read about the mushroom hunters.
Oh yeah.
Who were my grandparents, and after I've read it, I will tell you how it. I mean, I tell you in the poem exactly how old I was and when these things happened and why I didn't go with them and all of that. But this was, my grandparents came here a little over 100 years ago, around 1920, and lots of other people left Italy in that decade, and then shortly thereafter, the U.S. immigration laws changed, and they were forbidden to come to America. And so the other relatives, seeking to get out of what my mother would always refer to as la miseria. It's why did they come to America, Mom? Oh, la miseria. Well, they couldn't come to America, so they went to Australia, and I still have lots of relatives in Australia who are immigrants there. But these are the ones who came to the States. And this is called Mushroom Hunters, 1957. They wore earth tones, deep tans, and saddle-leathered taupes, along with bat gray, and the standby blacks of stockings tightly sleek, kerchiefs that cowled their broad-brushed, animated features. Old-world women and their men, coarse-vested, arms in rolled-up sleeves, home-cobbled boots with soles the thickness of their thumbs, went out together in a group on Saturdays into the woods, brown grocery bags in hand, to hunt wild mushrooms, as they used to do in Sicily. Old country woods and new, not quite alike, still yielded much the same. And though I was a child and uninvited, I wondered how the wisdom carried over that led them to the aspens, oaks, or birches, which sheltered, huddled at their bases, all the rich array of fungi that they prized. Did they amuse themselves imagining that they were young again, those friends, long-standing bootstrap immigrants on foot, along familiar childhood paths? Did they tell stories, sing, exchange old gossip? I imagine finding the favorite objects of their search conferred a comfort deep and reassuring. Old country truths still serve them in the new. For all that mushroom gathering was hidden from me at 9, I'd see when they returned their treasure. Secret creatures swelled at midnight, heavy with their oily essences, which stained the paper bags in dark, wet circles everywhere they touched. When tumbled out across the kitchen counter, plumped up dreams or languid fancies visible could not have stupefied like these, stubby and hunched, buff-domed or tendril tall and gently turned, with undersides close-veined and delicate, still dressed in clinging flecks of moist black earth and borrowed colors, here and there exploding in flaring ochres or smooth bluish black. Into a pot of water they would go then, with the shiny silver Walking Liberty $50. Heated to a rolling boil, they'd surface, bobbing in a group, their tones slick and muted. Strained off, they would sit, while my Nonna dumped the water out and fished up the bright disk. Initiate to mysteries, she knew. A blackened coin meant poison, and the trove went in the bucket. Today, I read that test is false, a folk tradition born in superstition, thought true because experience led the hunters to make safe choices. Current wisdom warns that lookalikes in a new country may deceive and threaten, deadly, though the coin comes clean. Our haves today, bled of their silver, no longer speak and lack their audience. Experience hints to us still of danger, but in today's world, lookalikes, more norm than rare exceptions, rule. And springing up in darkness overnight in thick profusion, crowd out our comfort with familiar truths. Where is our testing coin and the belief that lets us trust a search in unknown regions, in friendly and long-standing company?
Man.
I can remember the look of the coin the one time it came up black. Oh! There were all these beautiful looking mushrooms. They all got tossed out. Oh!
Oh,
every other time it came up silver every other time. So it was very, very dramatic. And I was just a boy. But as you can see, I wanted very, very much to. I knew there was mystery and I wanted to be a part of it.
Right,
This is as close as I could get, was to make all this up. Although they're going out and coming home with the bags with the stains and going into the boiling water, all of that really happened. The rest of it I had to guess at.
Yeah, and the details are, again, it's the like the observational imagery, really works well in this poem. And like where's our the kind of turn that it takes in the ending too, takes us a little again beyond the memory into something else.
Well, when I wrote it more than 20 years ago, but as I read it, I realized how pertinent it is to write now.
I was thinking that, I hesitated to say that, but I was thinking that when you read it.
It's an old poem, but I mean, that is the question. Where's our, we need a testing coin much more than we ever did, and we still don't have one.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Sorry. Look where
no, all you.
No.
Okay. My kind of the crux of like the really moving moment in this poem, for some reason, was lookalikes in a new country may deceive and threaten.
Yes.
Though the coin comes clean. And I think that speaks, that whole turn that you take, and just kind of like the sense of being lost and not having the long-standing company that you can rely on. Because in a way, it's like the whole coin tradition is something that is empirical rather than scientific. It's proved to work over time in a certain limited conditions. And when you when the world opens up and now the conditions are all over the place, then the same kind of empirical experience that has been working simply because of for factors that we don't know is no longer the case. We no longer can rely on that. So we cannot kind of just thoughtlessly rely on long-standing traditions because we don't know really kind of like where things come from. Like the world has opened up. And I think that's really that's how a lot of kind of historical disillusionment works, I feel. When there is something just gets reframed or the world comes flooding in. For some reason, I know this might be considered a dorky comparison to make, but even though it's a flawed movie, the film Gangs of New York has a moment toward the end of the film where the Civil War begins and everybody is being drafted, and the big conflict that we were following for the entire film, with these gangs that were, at each other's throats and having each other, battling each other. Suddenly they were all being drafted and they were all being swept away. And there's some visual, there's a flood that comes in and everything just sort of basically what used to be this very complex dichotomy is just washed out and is subsumed into the much larger historical events on a different scale. And in this case, and kind of the sense of vertigo that produces is kind of inevitably very powerful and scary. And it could apply to mushrooms, it could apply to just cultures. could apply to anything, and of course could apply to the immigrant experience when you're like the new country versus the old country. What worked in the old country, you carry in the old traditions into the new country, and it's like, that's not relevant anymore. You can't rely on that. So no, I guess as somebody that comes from a kind of from the old country, back many years ago, I find that also very relatable in a weird way, even though I was not. I gathered a few mushrooms, but I didn't have any of that sort of, like in the suburbs of Moscow, mushroom gathering. But it's like I don't have that the visceral experience of this exact experience, but the idea of losing those kind of set coordinates that work, you don't even know why, but they just kind of do. But now the coordinates have, and you're at sea.
Yeah. And the distance between, in a sense, there's an element of nostalgia for something that you never had, because I didn't have what my grandparents had. They really did. Many of the people from the town in Sicily they all came over, and so they all knew each other. They couples that were married in Sicily came over together, and families were sort of replanted. And so they literally had long-standing friends. And so they would go pick mushrooms in Sicily, or they go pick mushrooms, in Massachusetts. Yeah. And that's not something that I knew. I was not a part of that. I was only able to witness it, but it was already a reality that it seemed to work for them. But at the end of the poem, I'm making very clear that we've moved into a reality where we lack that. Yeah. And by the time I got around to writing about it, they were all long gone and vanished from the earth. So there is a kind of a sense of the lost Eden in this, and that we're on the outside where there's the weeping and the gnashing of teeth. But Anton, it's great for me to hear you say the things you're saying, because I think you're the only person who has firsthand knowledge of the immigrant experience that has ever talked about this poem to me.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, it is interesting. So it's good.
It feels very it feels like the archetypal poem. It feels like a classic in a way. Like it uses this kind of old-time sort of classic. Not classic, not just classic elements, but just a classic kind of narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, it asks the question: can you take home with you somewhere else? That's why I chose it. This is sure. And it kind of says, well, some people can, others can't. So, but yeah, that's the memory of that black coin, though, is why I wrote the poem. The image. Mm-hmm. I can see my mother's hand lifting the coin out. For the first time, I saw that it was black, because up until then, it was just, oh no, if it comes out black, that means this. And it was like, well, but I've seen it come out, a half a dozen times. It's always silver. And this was like, oh, I have to actually listen. This is a part of reality now. And so that stayed with me from my childhood, and that's what allowed me to go back in and blow this all up, all out of that. And it was like, it's like it had a soot on it. Oh. It was really literally blackened.
Yeah.
Cool. But you couldn't rub it off with your thumb, because my mother let me look at the coin, and I tried to rub it and it wouldn't rub off.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's
Yeah, because it was supposedly a chemical reaction with something in the poisons in the mushrooms. But I've read at length about this, and I'm informed it's not a real thing. But well, it was.
Well, you know what's
So
interesting? Not to be like suddenly the movie buff bringing up movie references, but there was another film that I probably have 25 years, Pleasantville, which is all like black and white, and there's like this idealized world in which everything is in its place, and then things, start changing, and at a certain point, the sports team, which is like in the high school, I guess, if I remember correctly, loses a game. And before that, they always won the game because they were the best, and that was just kind of like the characters they played. And at some point, one of the people said, "Well, can't win them all," which is like also like one of the stock cliches that they keep using. And then the other
yes,
person, but wait a second, but we have won them all. I know like, you all say you can't win them all. We all know that expression, but they have won them all.
But we've won them all.
So now it's real. Like for the first time,
yeah.
the actual possibility of things going both ways. And that's very
Well,
awesome.
that's it. That's the same thing. That's what went through my head when I saw that black $50.
Yes.
Uh-oh.
We always knew it could turn black, but we never actually saw it.
Yeah. So, wow. Oh, great. Well, okay. So let's go to our last round. And this is not the lightning round. My poem is quite long. What's your last one going to be, Luke?
And my poem is short. I chose to end on the bummer poem. I guess. This is about the burial ground. I live across the street from a Quaker burial ground. It's always been like an important place for me, and now I have my brother's buried there, my father's buried there, and so this is the poem about this place, which is, well, the poem explains it. Friend Southwestern Burial Ground. The place is loaded up with dead, but still the low white tombstones hunkered in the grass are baby teeth that bear us no ill will. Its stony wall and Gothic fence encompass a rural oasis tucked among the lanes of anxious row homes, corner stores, and taverns. At night, the brakes of the commuter trains screech faintly beneath the screech of its environs. There, death is made to seem a shutting out of all the noise and fuss of dailiness, and somehow we feel more at ease about the last breath we all have awaiting us. Outside its gates, this life's so thick with grief that we can hardly wait for that relief.
Mm. Mm.
So I don't know if you've ever seen a Quaker burial ground. They have like a simple burial, and all the tombstones have to be a certain size, and there are these tombstones that are really low to the ground, and
Yeah.
I guess that's how this poem got started for me. It's just because sometimes I see them from my window, and they do look like, like when a baby's tooth first starts to come in. That was the image that I built the whole thing.
It's a great image. I've never seen a baby's tooth image before, but this seems very apt.
Yeah. But here's this little rural kind of square in the middle of like a not like a super urban neighborhood, but like a pretty busy neighborhood. And here when I was a kid, I used to play in the cemetery, and it was a little like oasis there, a refuge kind of. and in the center of all this. So, yeah.
I never really heard of a burial ground in the way that you describe it, as a kind of a relief, that the quiet of the burial ground is a relief. It would have been very easy for you to make the contrast between the hustle and bustle of life. But the way that you characterize it is to say that it's just so much grief among the living, and that there is no grief afterward. So that you very carefully chosen your details to create this, to allow us to see death as you say, it makes you feel better about the last breath that is certainly on the way for everyone.
Sure.
It's a different way of looking at it, but you've constructed the imagery in the only way that you can to make it work, to make it plausible. So I don't know if that was conscious or not, but it absolutely works.
Yeah. I remember talking about this poem with, I forget, the ending was different. I forget what it was, but somehow or another, she helped me get there. It was with Anne. You know Anne Stevenson, the poet Anne Stevenson?
I don't.
She's a great poet, and you know her work? She was very good. And she was like a visiting poet at Westchester during the year. And I spent the day hanging out with her in the poetry house there. And I remember talking with her about some of these poems, and particularly this one. And whatever she said to me, I don't remember the specifics, but I always think of her. That's how I got to that ending, was something she said to me.
Do you know what the earlier ending was?
It was like a rhyme that didn't quite work, right? And she might have even suggested like the rhyming words or something. I couldn't remember, but I do remember it clicked. And then I went downstairs and I was hanging out and I finished it. And then I was talking to her later. I'm like, I rewrote this. How about that? And she's like, that's it.
That's a good feeling.
Yeah.
So does that often happen? I mean, you say that you're very slow, but there are different ways of being slow. You can make slow, steady progress, or you can do a lot of doubling back
in fits
and throw a lot of things out.
Yeah, throw a lot of things out or put it away, and then it comes in fits and spurts.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, this is a small poem, but it's absolutely worked through. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about. And certainly, I was especially struck by the rhyme dailiness and awaiting us. Somehow it feels really spot on. And just the general idea that, focusing on something, being so calm, like the graves and like the unadornedness of them, somehow we're made to feel at ease about the last breath we'll have awaiting us. It's just so recognizable and true, but not necessarily like something that you kind of immediately think of. It's not like what the culture expects you to think about.
Oh, that's for sure. Yeah. Wow. So all of those poems are in your book,
all
right,
these
Luke?
poems are in my book, available through fine booksellers, whatever you want to. It was from Kelsay Books. You can get it right from there. The Elephant's Mouth. And on the cover, my friend Anna Tintaris, who I've known my whole life, she took the photograph for the cover. This is not my house, but it's my block. And it's part of it.
So those are the row houses that
those
you
are the row houses
to.
right across from here. Out here is the burial ground.
I mean, they remind me of like row houses in Liverpool. The Beatles. growing up in these.
I remember when I was a teenager, the Beatles anthology coming on TV, right? And I watched it with my dad, who was too old for the Beatles, really. But through us, my brothers, he learned to appreciate them. And I remember watching the Beatles anthology, and they showed like their homes and stuff. They grew up in the Catholic Church and stuff. And my dad was like, well, they were just like us. They're working class people. Like if we lived in England, this is what our house would be like. And I remember that was like a eureka moment for him. And after that, he started liking the Beatles much more.
Wow, that's great. So why didn't you take a picture of your actual house?
She took a bunch of different pictures, and it was just like, I guess the particular angle here or something, and I don't know. It just worked out, and I think that when the cover, whoever designed the cover, when they designed the manuscript, I think they cropped the photo a little bit too. But yeah.
You didn't have direct input in the design, but you probably had a right to reject it, right?
Yeah, and I was able to say, like, she took some pictures and we talked about them together, and I think I gave them a choice between a few, and this is the one that they went with. And then the person who designed the cover.
Was it Shea Culligan?
Yes, that's it. That's him.
Yeah, he's the cover. He's a friend of mine.
Great.
I've known him since 2005, and
okay.
What happened is he had designed the cover for my book Ordinary Impalers back in 2017, and then Charlotte Inez, who you probably know.
Yes.
Yeah, I know Charlotte.
Liked the design and asked Shea to design her cover, and then after
for Descanso Drive.
Another one.
Descanso Drive. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And after that design, like looking at my cover and at Charlotte's cover, Karen Kelsay actually liked them so much that she hired.
Oh, is that right?
The designer for everything.
Yeah. Well, he did a great job.
Yeah.
I'm very pleased with what he did.
And Shea also did this cover for my book.
Oh, great.
Very good.
One Night We Will No Longer Bear the Ocean. And this one is not from Kelsay, it's from ELJ Editions, but they let me pick, cover designer. And the image here is, I took only, this is actually a collage of 3 images, and I took the picture of the houses here, which is in Fort Hancock, New Jersey, in like Sandy Hook, the very north of the Jersey Shore. And then the statue was a photo he took in Zurich, where I actually was just recently, just as a tourist. I've been to Switzerland a couple of times in my life, and the sea is from Cape Cod, which kind of speaks to a favorite vacation spot especially for my parents, but also for me, and just sort of. So
it's got a personal significance for you that other people don't need to know about, although now they may.
Exactly.
Wow, nice.
Yeah.
Well, let's since you're showing us the book, have you read anything from that book yet, or are you about to? Or
yeah, so I'm going to pivot to a poem that's from that book, and it's called At the James Joyce House. And I think, I'm just going to read it, and, I'll say a couple of things maybe afterwards about sort of the sense of home. I think it's going to be pretty self-evident, but yeah, it's sort of toward the end of the book, which has a lot to do with kind of the poems in the book are organized.
Hold on 1 second. Yeah, well, I'm going to be done soon. I'm sorry. They were asking me. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so the poems are organized around the structure, the arc of a relationship, And this is sort of the tail end of the book where the relationship is kind of in the rear view, but it's being reminisced about and transfigured into lots of poetry and lots of processing through writing and reimagining. So this is called At the James Joyce House. This is what I wanted to let you know. When I came home last night, I found my building repainted. Property management had renamed it from Ocean Plaza Apartments to James Joyce House, probably trying to boost the rentals next year. Neon lights above the front door displayed the new name in genuine Joyce handwriting, and all the condos had been rearranged the way James Joyce would have done it. The desk from which I had recited to you our surrealism was replaced with something faux Victorian. The dining chairs were also Joycean. An introductory booklet I found on the dinner table made a big deal of the way they were stylized so closely to his living room. You'd think it sat on every last one of them. In the bathroom, the shells we had picked up waddling for years around Cape Cod were replaced with a single crumbling clam shell. But that shell bore a genuine autograph of James Joyce. The booklet boasted that the property management had handed me an antique worth $20,000 just to pay me back for the inconvenience of rearranging my rooms and throwing out half my things. Honored as I am, this morning I spent 2 hours looking for a rusty nail to dip into my Jameson. The rustier, the better. I had no TV to distract me. James Joyce didn't have one, so now neither do I. Not that I mind, of course, and yet tears come out of my eyes for some reason, and I take walks to inspect the building's dead ends, looking for spots intact from remodeling, trying to get back to a past that included you. If you were here, though, the autograph of James Joyce would have made it all worth it. You would have wept on my shoulder to be so close to your hero. I would have tried to talk to you about us, but you would have circled back to the dead, to Leopold Bloom's unsavory diet, to the goat-like creatures Stephen Dedalus had dreamed up. A panther would have shrieked outside the window just then, as we kissed, and you would have turned your eyes to look at it, acting like I wasn't even present. That's okay, I'd say to myself. At least you are here.
Wow. What a concept. I'm glad I have your book because I can go back and reread it later. Yeah. Wow. You go so long before bringing her into it. I think that's a terrific instinct if it was an instinctive move on your part. Or if you planned it, then it was, it was a really good plan. But, wow.
Well, just kind of throughout, because I talk about, we waddled around Cape Cod, this, like the whole thing is kind of a letter. This is what I wanted to let you know. I'm telling her a story. But in terms of the direct involvement of like imagining her here, indeed, that's and I think the idea largely is that.
Yeah, and we can be. I mean, we have room to imagine that the narrator is speaking to us or someone like us until you get to the point of directly identifying the she. So, so even though it is in that kind of, it's in a matter of fact, but still an intimate tone, a familiar tone, We don't know for sure until we get to that point. And then all of the construct makes a different kind of sense, which that's a very nice thing, because you go a long time thinking, okay, why? And here's some more of it. This is a very thorough statement about replacing one's life with James Joyce's life. This is a very extended and thorough. Now, why are we being? And then it all just clicked for me. Then it really clicked in. So I don't know. Am I making sense to you, Luke?
Yeah.
And this is at the end of the book, you say, and the book is an arc.
It's near the end of the book. It's like 5-6 poems from the end. Well, actually, no, wait a second. It's like 10 poems from the end. So it's in the last section, which has a lot of just sort of looking back and reimagining and the possibility of kind of like getting back in touch in a very different way, like under transfigured, more distant kind of, type of relationship, but also, still kind of being in each other's life.
Yes. Yeah, I know about that one.
I guess.
Wow. Well, yeah, please.
Yeah, I guess the idea of home here is that the sense of home has become so permeated with like this other person that's kind of like it's almost, even though she's no longer here, the home bears all of the signs of like something that she kind of enjoyed or whatever. So it's almost like it's like there is their own relationship that and their own shared memories, and there is also like her fascination with James Joyce, which almost like took over in some ways and kind of
I mean, the changing of all of the details of his life is like a usurpation of it, of all that it was. It's just usurped. It's yeah. Wow. Like I say, that's quite a concept. Well, I'm going to rush to mine because we've gone a good long time, and this is quite a fairly long poem, so I want to go to it. Yeah. But this is because Luke, of course, has a life.
Well, they're starting to revolt. They're like, "Oh, you gotta get out of here!" Like, yeah, I'm in the room.
Tell them I'll be quick.
Yeah.
Okay, hang on. I gotta enlarge it and go. So I'm coming back round to the geographical home, and this is in the park in which I grew up. In that park, there's a big hill, and on the top of the hill, there is a castle, a stone castle. And that's all you really need to know. The rest is contained in the poem. This is called The Parapet. We stood behind my father, my two friends and I, before the side door of the castle, a pocket castle, single-family dwelling, whim of an American physician, its original discovered on vacation in the English countryside. Its plans were cribbed, its duplicate assembled from rough New Hampshire granite blocks nearby. Foreign in this landscape, set atop a high hill overlooking the expanse of forest, lake, and pond, where I grew up, it was boarded shut, abandoned, given to the city as a centerpiece, with its surrounding land to form a park. The city lacked the money to maintain it, so it was locked and no one had been in for decades. But my father had a key. He supervised the city parks. I knew no knights had ever crowded this great hall or kept watch from this modest parapet, but I'd begun to read Sir Walter Scott. For me, the darkened rooms beyond the door were bursting with a cast of characters whose colors swelled in my imagination. So when my dad took out the iron key, we three boys were leaning toward the door, eager for the climb up to the tower to stand against the topmost stones in safety and see the green earth spread out at our feet, for such were all our boyhood dreams of promise. But once across the threshold, we were in the dark. Slivers of light from boarded windows revealed a blank space, emptied of its forms and furniture. Against the wall across from us, a stairway to the tower stopped dead, halfway from the ceiling to the floor. We had no way to climb. The view from high above would have to wait. This emptiness would have to do. Our privilege in being there at all would have to live above our disappointment. That view would wait for 40 years. The city's fortunes rose and rehabilitated. The castle was refitted as a venue for public gatherings and celebrations. Excuse me. And one of these, the wedding of a cousin, long decades after I had moved away, had brought me back to it a second time to mark a family joy. Hang on. Pardon me. And one of these, the wedding of a cousin, long decades after I had moved away, had brought me back to it a second time to mark a family joy, but with my feelings torn. For in the hospital nearby, my mother lay deep in her final illness. These days, the doctor said, would be her last. I'd come to tell the father of the bride, Mom's younger, only brother. He had been a thorn in her side when he was a boy. He'd grown into a fierce ally. To me, he'd been as much a father as my own. At the reception, open double doors arched and welcomed. High panes soaked the hall in sunlight. It was cozy and profuse with sprays of flowers close beside the staircase, which led aloft. My uncle had gone up, I guessed, perhaps for quiet, to take in the view, to think about the way their paths were crossing, older sister and young bride. Standing against the parapet, he gazed out at the evergreens, the trails that led down to the cooling lake, the ones that led to God knows where, deeper into the trees, the ones that natives to this place had taken centuries ago to destinations we would never know. I stood beside him, reported what the doctor said of days. Without turning his head, his eyes still fixed across the green expanse of park, he said, "We're on the front line now." We didn't know it at the time, but he would live a year. We live to rise. We rise to see. We see what is prepared for us, what we may not turn away from, what we must embrace. We climb in time up to the parapet.
Beautiful.
I like how it comes back to that from the beginning. It seems like the right move there. Well, it's really very moving.
It was a strange experience going into this place 40 years, for the second time,
yeah.
40 years after going, because it was desolate. It was just, and there was no way up the stairs. And then 40 years later, it was completely transformed. I mean, it was a wedding reception. It had all of the trappings. No one lived there, but it was perfectly well kept up and, of course, profusely decorated. And so that the contrast was really marked. And so it made for a very interesting staging area for this moment that I was to have with my uncle. And I have to confess, when he said we were on the firing line now, because he was 21 years older than me, I thought, you're not talking about me.
Yeah.
But of course, that was 27 years ago, and he was right.
Yeah.
So, he lasted just under a year from that moment. So
wow.
So home, for me, this is home, and home is honeycombed with layers of meaning and stretching over the course of my life. So I thought it would be a nice one to end with, because it does kind of marry the me that I was with the me that I became, and the place I grew up and what it turned into, because they're crossing paths, and everything, in a sense, it was the desolation of the castle that I really own, because that's what's gone now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it's sort of ironic, isn't it? Like that, it's like when you were there when you were young and there was so much left ahead of you. It was like you couldn't go up there, right? And then it's the same place that was desolate. And now it's, as you said, decked out and decorous and all these things. But the circumstances of life have changed, and you're on the firing line now. But now you can go up, right? But it's like it's like the almost like ironic, like when you're young and everything's ahead of you, this place is desolate. When you're looking from the firing line or whatever, now it's splendid, and you could go up. Like it's a sort of inversion in a way.
Yeah, there is that, but also at the same time, symbolically, when you're young, you can't see anything. It's only near the end of your life that you see it all. But if you can't, but so you climb up to the parapet, but it turns out what you see when you get up there, you just as well better off not seeing when you were a kid.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's all this is it. I grew up in a metaphor. I grew up in a park with a castle on it. So, I mean, I was going to have to come up with ways to use it. And then it just so happened that it went from uninhabited to very much an object of public use. And but it still had a private meaning for me that it didn't have for anybody else. And my two best friends who went in there with me when I was a kid, they got to go into the castle because of my dad, and because we were all friends, and we still talk about that moment of going in there.
Yeah.
Because it was like the secret that no one else could share.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then it turned into a different secret that no one else could share. Because, of course, my uncle had to keep his face on. His daughter was being married downstairs,
Sure.
So there's a lot of life in these images, in the symbols. Sure. So anyway, that's where I wanted to end it. And this has been great fun. We've kept ourselves going for a very long time. So I do want to pull it together, but I got to thank you too. This has been very companionable, but with great insights, and the poetry is really strong. And so it's It's delightful. I'm grateful to you both.
Well, it was a pleasure, really, and it was good to see you both.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The invitation.
Feels like home.
Yeah.
Well, we'll meet again in person, and but
Yeah, I
yeah,
hope so.
in a real sense, among poets, the language is like home, and you know, we are speaking our language, and so we feel at home doing it. So that's a good way to tie this up. So I will say farewell, and we will meet again.
Well, except
Yes.
the recording of this reading, of this conversation, one day will be just like the secret recording you had done of your family.
That's there you go.
Well, I'd like to hope so, although I may not make it that far. But you guys will maybe see that day. So,
Yeah.
all right. So good evening.